we've had a little bit of a hiccup. Our host that we had lined up for today, Maretha Smit, who is the CEO of Diversity Works and who did the great work for the Construction Accord last year, is unfortunately unable to get through on her computer, but we're hoping she will get over those difficulties in the next wee while. So I'll kick us off. The reason we're all kind of here today is to we keep hearing that we all know that diversity is the right thing to do, but we've got some great examples here today of people actually out in business, out in the field, making the most, making improvements in their business through the uptake of these diversity practices. So without, we'll just introduce the panel. So we've got Rick Hurd of Naylor Love, Liz Watson of Stone Roofing, Stacey Mendonga, sorry, Stacey, I think I just mispronounced your name. QS in Wellington, and we've got Cody Peppery from Multi Civil Contractors. So kicking off, we'll start off with you, Rick. Rick, why do you think it's so important to focus on diversity in construction, and let's have your personal perspective on that?
Well, personal perspective really is, Graham, is because it's the right thing to do. We've got a lot of social challenges in this country, poverty and house prices dropping and inflation and all those sorts of things. And there's enough stresses on society without alienating any particular group. So from a social perspective, it's absolutely vital that we give everybody equal opportunity in this country and level the playing fields as much as practically possible. So that's something I personally and Naylor Love is very passionate about, giving everybody the opportunity. And the other aspect of it from a purely commercial perspective, Graham, is the fact that we've got a major skills shortage through all facets of the industry in New Zealand. And I'm sure you're aware of the construction industry, everybody from the people making the tea to the CEOs, we're short of skills and experiences right across those all facets of the business. So why would you restrict yourself to one or two or three areas of society? Why not open the opportunity to a far greater number of people than you possibly can? And probably there is a third aspect of too, and that is if you look at any board in any industry, the boards are always made up of a variety of people with different backgrounds and thinking, different skill sets. And there's a very, very good reason for that, and that is about avoiding the area of groupthink. And businesses that tend to get into trouble are often got a situation where they've got people sitting around the board table who take a particular perspective of a situation the same way. And I see it firsthand on our board. We've got 2 women and ethnic diversity on our board, and it's just seeing the different ideas and the different perspectives that come out of conversations and the way to tackle challenges is quite refreshing to see those different perspectives and how they can play out in a business and how they can actually add to the value of the business overall. So those essentially are the 3 areas, Graham, but the big one is doing the right thing.
And so how are you implementing these practices at Naylor Love, Rick, and have you found that difficult?
When I say it is difficult, but it's difficult from the perspective that it takes time. I don't, as a leader, I don't spend several hours a day or a week working on diversity, but I have to find myself, I have to change myself very much. I've been in the industry 50 years, as most of you can tell by looking at my face, but the point is that I've done subconscious bias training, and I was absolutely blown away. Personally, I thought I was a very open-minded person, but when it comes to subconscious bias, how intrinsic and inherent it is in an individual's behaviours and makeup, I was quite disturbed by that personally. And so what I'm doing as a leader is I'm trying to be highly conscious of the way I impact on other people, whether it be gender, race, or whatever it might be within the organisation. And I've got to make sure I'm very, very careful the way I frame my context of what I'm saying, to making sure that I'm not making anybody feel left out or not part of the overall team. But it's changing culture, and changing culture takes a long time. And I'm pretty comfortable the way we're tracking at Naylor Love, but I'd have to say that it's a slow process. I've been in tenure at Naylor Love now for 10 years, and when we had our first management conference going back, under my tenure at least, about 8 years ago, we had something like 7% of the people that attended that conference were women. Now we had a couple of weeks ago, we had our senior management conference again, and it was a little under 20% of the people at that conference were women. Now we're still a long way from where we need to be, but the point is that it's growing. The number of people in the senior positions in the company is growing, and so the opportunities for those for future promotion is growing. And so we will see more and more women and people from other ethnic diversities, Pacifica, and in fact a broad range of the different races that are present in New Zealand. I'm very pleased to say, for an example, in our Auckland office, we have flags around our smoker room of all the ethnicities of people that are working for that Auckland operation. There's about 30 different flags hanging up in that smoker room, which is really, really encouraging to see. But still a long, long way to go, and we've got an enormous amount of work still to do before we can be comfortable that we're, truly represent the demographic of society.
And so you're getting there as far as actually having the diversity, Rick, but what's that doing for the performance of the business? Have you noticed any measurable changes there?
Yeah, well, we measure engagement, and I think this is an important part of measuring diversity as well. We've got very, very high levels of staff engagement. We run an annual staff survey, which is done by an independent organisation, which measures the engagement of about, I think it's 300 or 400 companies across New Zealand and Australia. And the feedback we get from that is that people are highly engaged. We're in the top quartile of all construction companies, all companies within the survey, and well into the top quartile, particularly for engineering and construction companies. So that feedback is telling us that we're doing some things right. We're making a few changes to survey questionnaires to try and, because historically we've never differentiated. Obviously, we tend to differentiate between male and female, but not through ethnic diversity or gender bias or gender preference. And so we're trying to get some understanding of what's going on there to ensure that the people who are different outlooks on life and from those perspectives or different genders are feeling equally at home in this company. Anecdotally, I think they are, but I'd really like to see some hard evidence.
Do you get any feedback from your customers, Rick?
Yes, some of the more enlightened customers, who are really looking for diversity in the companies that they're working for. We're starting to see that, and we're starting to hear some really good things. We had a great bit of feedback recently from one of our projects in the Central North Island, the local iwi, who wrote to us and thanked us because we'd taken on a young chap who had been out of the workforce. He was in his mid-30s. He hadn't had a job since he left school when he was 14, and he had the stigma of a gang tattoo on his face. And we gave him an opportunity. And last couple of weeks ago, he won the Employee of the Month award. And he was absolutely tears. He just was beside himself with the fact that he could feel such a sense of belonging. And it's just an example of the sort of positivity you get. And this chap from the guys, we wrote to us thanking us for the efforts we'd put into helping develop this young man. And I got a great deal of satisfaction out of that, seeing those sorts of changes in people.
So what you're saying, Rick, what I'm kind of hearing is that it's not just a matter of diversity; it's a matter of inclusion and actually supporting people within the workplaces, not just bringing them in.
Absolutely, it's creating the greatest level of opportunity within the organisation for people of all types, and then not only that, when they're in the organisation, supporting them and helping them develop to their greatest potential. And we do that. We try to do that for everybody, and that's what all good businesses and organisations in this country should be aspiring to do, to develop the best out of their people. Thanks,
Rick. I don't see any questions coming up. We've got time for questions after each of our speakers, but we'll carry on and talk with Stacey. But just a reminder that if anybody has any questions, please throw them in the chat. Stacey, so speaking from your experience at Newcrest Construction in Wellington, Do you think things are changing in the sector? I'm not going to hazard a guess at how long you've been in the sector. That might not be appropriate, but I'm sure you haven't been there for 50 years like Rick.
No, that's absolutely correct. Look, I've been in the industry for kind of over 30 years, and I have seen, some really great leaps and bounds. I mean, I remember when there was a time when, high-vis vests were a new thing. We had our boss go over to the States and he brought back photos of a site wearing high-vis vests. Can you still hear me? Yep. And high-vis vests were, a bit of a novelty. Now they're just normal. We don't step onto a site without it. But women, by now that I'm based on site, I am seeing a lot of changes. Have seen them over the decades, but since COVID, I think there's been kind of really big leaps and bounds, and so there should be, to having more women on site, in other areas, we've been seeing more women bosses, as in our clients. We've seen more women consultants, trainees and grads, but COVID and what BCITO were able to do with the apprentices and pushing for more engagement allowed the free apprenticeship training. And what it did is it gave some women a chance to give it a go, removing some of those barriers which were trying to get an apprenticeship. Things were easier. So I have seen some really big changes in it, and I love seeing it. I spend a lot of time encouraging women and men into our industry, so it's really great to be able to see it happen. And yeah, I'm really chuffed every time we get some new young people, young men and women onto our sites.
That's amazing. The other great news is that Maretha has been able to join our call, so we can now have a professional presenter come in and host for the rest of the webinar. So I'll pass over to Maretha to carry on.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Graham. I'm not 100% sure if I have come in, because it does look like I can't unvideo myself.
We can hear you. We can hear you.
What a way to make an introduction, isn't it? I will continue the conversation just from Black Box at the moment. I think Stacey, if you and hello everybody, so sorry about my technical issues that I've had today, and remains to have. So Stacey, looking at it through a gender lens specifically, why do you think that more women on site is a good thing?
Well, I mean, I'll reiterate what Rick said. It's just good business, and there is a skill shortage. So it's not just a good thing, but it is business savvy, and it's a matter of survival. We need more expertise. And what I have been able to see is I have seen women change mid-career. So I have met women who were teachers, someone was a pilot, childcare workers, or travel agents who have decided to give construction a go. So why is that good? I think it's good because it allows for more, for different thoughts and concepts on site. So, we try, I don't know, what I try to do is I try to have a point of difference from my colleagues. So when I started training 30 odd years ago as a QS, all I wanted to do was to blend in and look like a QS, that no one actually noticed that I was a female. I just wanted to be good at my job and do what I needed to do well. What I didn't have the confidence to realize is that actually I should be able to contribute in a different way. And it's taken it's taken a couple of decades for me to realise that you know, standing up and contributing something different is a really great thing. You know, Rick mentioned about groupthink. You know, groupthink is a terrible concept where everyone just agrees with the boss. No bosses want that. They might like it, but actually they don't want it. They don't want to have a whole team that just says, you know, yes, that's your, of course, your way is the right way. Every boss wants someone to challenge and give initiative and have some really great ideas. And so I think that diversity, more diversity, creates that. And it's not just gender diversity, but it's cultural and age and a whole lot of, you know, just a whole lot of different people involved.
And I remember from the conversation that we had, Stacey, that you were saying women care. And that has an impact on various things. And it's not to say that women are the only people caring, but there is very much an impact that it has across the organisation. And what have you seen at Newcrest and at those sites where you're working, what that caring does on that site?
Well, it just allows some different conversations to be had. And I didn't really notice. It was someone told me that women care. And I went to a health and safety meeting in Christchurch, and there were a lot of women at this meeting. In fact, I'd never been amongst so many women in construction before. And I sat next to the guy beside me. I said, wow, this is amazing. There's so many women at this, you know, this construction health and safety meeting. And he said, why are you surprised about that? Don't you realise that it's because women care more? That's why they're here. It's like, oh, I hadn't really thought about it. So what I've been able to kind of notice and be part of and what I enjoy is actually kind of trying to, you know, see my colleagues as more than just my work colleagues. You know, I'm interested in their kids. You know, I used to really enjoy it when my boss remembered my kids' names or asked about my kids. So it's kind of asking and getting to know people a little bit more from their work dimension, but, you know, a background dimension. It's not hard to, you know, to say, you know, how are you, how's it going? I mean, we are busy. We are in the busiest time that we've had for you know, for a decade. So it's easy to not do it, but I think it leaves us just a little bit one-dimensional. I want to know what other people do and what they like to do. And I'm not saying sit down for 20 minutes and have a good yak, but it's just, you know, just little snippets of getting to know people. And you just never know what their backstory might be, you know, why they may look stressed or tired, and you know, it just might cause you to understand a little bit more of why people react in some of the ways that they do. And you know, I'm just a firm believer of good communications, and that helps. And our industry has been a little bit, you know, it's always been the process and the actual physical stuff that's been more important than the communication. I mean, and it's something that we are improving, and hopefully by having more women on site, that is happening. And had a friend who was a young project manager, and she said that people would come up to her and talk to her about stuff that they didn't want to talk about to their male colleagues. And when she left that site, she was a little bit worried about, you know, what they were going to do after she left. I'm not at all saying that women have to be counsellors and should be counsellors. I'm not saying that at all. There is, you know, there's experts in those fields, but it's just not hard to, you know, to kind of say to people, how are you going? How's that new baby?
And I think also that we tend to, when we do engagement in organisation, engagement measuring an organisation, we tend to hold managers to account, to say it is because something has happened in the organisation and as a result of the managers, why people may not be engaged. But actually engagement stretches far beyond the organisation. People may be not feeling that engaged because of stuff that's happening in their community, in their homes and so forth. So to your point, if we're listening well, we are able to work a lot better with those people. So really fantastic feedback there. But in terms of the quiet voices, we received an interesting question that I know you referenced as well in a conversation around those quiet voices. How do you think we could make space for those voices to be heard in organizations?
Well, you know, I think it's really up to, you know, supervisors and managers to not just take advice or listen to the domineering or the, you know, the louder people. You know, recognize that there's some cultures that it's just rude to be loud and overtalk other people. I think it is a real skill to listen. I think it is a real skill to be able to go back to, you know, the quieter person in the meeting or, you know, in a group scenario and say, you know, what's your comment, you know, what's your opinion? You know, everybody's a bit different, and certainly for a long time I was quite happy to sit in the background and not offer my opinion unless I was asked. And you can't always wait for people to ask you. They have to be quite a skilled chair of a meeting to have the nous to ask everybody at different times what their opinion is, especially, you know, some people want to make it a fast meeting, so get it over and done with as soon as possible.
So just checking, I don't see any questions in the chat just yet. So maybe just another question that came in before we in the lead up to the webinar. Question around policies. Do you have specific policies that you implement in your organization that works at site level, or are they reasonably informal?
Yeah, they're very informal. I haven't really seen any policies. I've yet to see some, but it's just kind of good social behaviour. I quite like to go and when I'm walking through site and just make sure I check in with any of the women on site. Most of them are miles younger than me, and just make sure that they know that there's you know, that there is a female loo, and you know that I'm upstairs in the office should they need any assistance in any way. I don't want to make a big song and dance. I don't kind of make a beeline to, I don't want to embarrass them, but I just kind of check in an informal way. Equally the same way as if I know there's a young guy who's just got a new baby, you know, I know that he's probably a bit tired and a bit knackered and a bit overwhelmed. Just the same way, I just check in on him and just make sure that he's getting a decent amount of sleep. So it is informal and it's intuitive, and it just makes good sense.
And I'm loving that perspective also that you're bringing around the fact that you want to bring that different perspective. It's important for you to take up that responsibility of being different, and then to hear the feedback from that.
Yeah, I really enjoy it if one of my colleagues, you know, if I make a suggestion and one of my colleagues say, "Oh, Stacey, I hadn't thought of that." And it's like, yes, that's a win for me. It's really great that I've been able to think of something different and bring that to the group, really.
Great stuff. Thank you very much for that, Stacey. And we are going to be moving on to Cody. So Cody Pepere, and again, sorry for joining a little bit late. I'm not sure, Graham, have you introduced everybody, or do I introduce them one by one? Cody, have you been introduced?
We did at the start, yeah. We just kind of talked about who everyone was.
Fantastic. Well, welcome again from me also. Cody, so from your personal perspective, and from that of Multi-Civil as a Kaupapa Māori organisation, why does diversity inclusion matter for you?
Oh, like a lot of our team members, they all come from different races and backgrounds and ethnicities, um, and so it's all about creating a team, you know, and you've got to be willing to work with all these different ethnicities and make them feel like they're at home, because you know we spend a lot of time with each other, so we have to work in a place that we feel supported and feel the company like culture where we're all in the same place doing the same job. Because you know the amount of time we spend at work is more than we spend at home, so we better be happy where we are.
And also quite the story that you have around your own lived experience and giving back. You speak about leaving a legacy around the people that we make. How do you support Maori and Pacifica people who didn't have those opportunities?
Yeah, so like you know, we do have a lot of Māori Pacifica that work for our company. You know, I myself and my father, we're from Māori Pacifica background, you know, and I've been very privileged to be a third generation contractor. You know, my grandfather's a contractor, my dad's a contractor, I'm a contractor, and I've been given the skill and the mentorship to be able to give the next generation a chance to be contractors like us, you know, and be able to grow and be able to be in an environment where they have the opportunity to learn. You know, a lot of our guys come from some pretty bad backgrounds. You know, as younger fellas, you know, a lot of time behind bars and you know, a lot of issues with the police. But that doesn't mean that they can come to an organisation like us and have an opportunity for their future in their life. You know, and my old man, we have this saying in our company, it's about creating legacies, and it's not about the jobs that we do, it's about the people that we change by doing the jobs. And a lot of people that know our company and our background on how we work, they see that as truth. You know, we do spend a lot of time supporting our people and creating that environment. You know, people like myself, I was never good at school. I couldn't sit in a room. I just wanted to drive diggers like my dad, you know, and an industry like us, we aren't the best in certain learning environments, and we do fail a lot in schooling, and we do struggle with literacy, numeracy, and all those kind of things, you know. But you know, one thing I found is that without taking down the boundaries of those failures with our people, they don't give it a shot, because they spent their whole lives going through the same thing like me, just never good at school. And it was always just a worry to do exams or tests or even driver's licenses, you know. We seemed to fail a few times, but we worked really hard in our business to try and create an environment that it wasn't about failure, it was about the journey to get to the end. And working with those people and spending the time, effort and energy to be able to grow those people, because as much as everyone says it's easy to tell a guy to do a course, when you've got people with backgrounds that have never done a course or never passed anything in their life, a step like that is quite overwhelming. And it's about creating a culture and creating an environment where they feel supported to be able to take that step. I don't know, but a lot of people might not realise that it's getting a license is pretty hard if you've got 4 or 5 times of driving a car without a license. But those kind of things are superficial, you know. It's about how we get to the end of the journey, not the pathway on the journey, you know. And it's just being aware. Like Stacey said, you know, my dad, he's one of the original civil guys of Wellington, you know. He's a big guy. But he's the first guy who'll come up, shake your hand, or give you a hug to anyone on site, you know. And I'm quite in a rush person, but he's always taught me that whenever you go to site, you shake everyone's hand, you say hello, how's your day going, and you spend the time, you know. Like, I know all my boys' kids' names, and I take that and I ask them, you know, if I'm working with them on a job, well, how's your son going? You know, he's turned 6 soon, didn't he? You know, and it's amazing how much that means to the team when you take that effort. We're only a smaller type organization. We don't have the size of the bigger type companies, but for us that's quite an important thing. And that's just watching what my dad done for many years, and his approach to people, it doesn't matter who or what you are, he'll always say hello and just give you a smile, because he always says a smile will make another person's day. You just never know what you're going through, you know?
Yeah. There's a bit of a theme coming through here, if I'm looking to hearing what you're saying, what Stacey's saying, which is kind of just connect, talk, listen. Be interested, because that's where all the difference happens. I want, Cody, for us to just look a little bit practical at the how. So how you build that culture of inclusion for, let's talk first about Māori Pacifica young people who didn't have those opportunities. And I know that we've discussed a little bit around neurodiversity in our conversation last week as well. And I see that there's a question in the a note in the Q&A around awareness to neurodiversity. Tell me around those learning barriers and what you do practically to help people through those learning barriers.
All the learning barriers, like I figured out pretty early that these guys don't want to write anything, because that's not what they do. You know, we drive diggers, we put pipes in the ground, we dig holes, and we pull down buildings. Like we're not designed to sit here and write essays, and we can't articulate through written literacy on what we're trying to do. We really struggle with that. So we spent time with some of our training providers, and they let a lot of our guys do it verbally, so in person, and that made the boys feel more comfortable, because even simple things like we'd bring the assessor in and we'd draw. We've got a big whiteboard in our training room downstairs, and the boys could draw the scope of the works, so explain it to them, because we're all visual people, we learn visually and by doing. And if I had to read a 300-page specification to tell me how to put a pipe in the ground, I probably wouldn't know how to do it. But if someone drew me a picture and told me, I'd probably have a better idea. But it's spending the time to understand who your demographic of your worker is, the background that they come from, and actually engaging in them and the process of their learning. It does take a lot of time, and time is precious, but when you're trying to grow people, that time never comes back unless you put the time in for them. For us, we had classes at 4 o'clock on every Tuesday and Thursday, and it was always good for us as senior leaders to have one of us there, because if the boss is there, one of the owners is there, they care, and that amount of care means that they put the effort in, because we're taking time out of our day to grow them and give them opportunities, and my biggest thing for this whole training thing through our organization is like, hopefully the next generation never feel that failure, and we get that chance to be able to do what we do and what we love, and in a way that doesn't come with all the social boundaries like it usually used to do. If you looked at the industry 10 years ago, there was no way you could do a training course and do it verbally. It wouldn't be accepted. That's not acceptable. But now people are learning that people can't write. People can't do it that way. They can draw a picture. They can figure out all the heights you need on a picture, but they can't actually articulate that in a way that can be examined and processed. And in our industry, we're all here because we're not doctors, we're not professors, but what we do in our industries, we are doctors and professors in our own right and in our own way. And putting on a high vis, a lot of people used to look down on that, but I'm proud every day to wear a high vis. It means everything, and we change the world more than a lot of people think. People don't realize how important it is for those 20 guys on the road, even though there's a million cones, stop and go, but the important work that those people do every single day, and I always, a lot of my friends and that, they may mock what we do on the roads and how we do work, but I always say, well, you can't go taller without me, bro, so no point laughing about it.
Oh, that's fantastic, Cody. I've got a question around that, the schooling system. You are talking about the different learning styles and the learning barriers, and we know that through the schooling system, it's just not built for those equitable outcomes for our Māori and Pacifica learners. And to a large extent, there was this normalization of failure. How do you in the organization break through that and build that self-esteem?
So it takes a lot of time. We spent time talking to them and understanding, like, so before we put them onto courses, we go through the process. And myself and my team up in the office, we spend a bit of time going through all the different courses and understanding what the strengths and what the weaknesses are for the different types of guys we have. And then we actually, you know, as much as it sounds cliche, we just sit down and talk to them person to person, like, you know, what's your fear? What are you scared of, bro? Like, you know, you can do this. This is what you do every day, day in, day out. This is what you, like, your bread and butter. You know, what's your fear around it, you know? And it's always the failure thing. Don't want to let us down, you know, don't want to let you down. You guys put so much time into me. And I was like, you're not letting me down unless you give it a chance, you know? And you've got the support of people here to be able to give you that chance and give you a go and help you through it if you're willing to take the step, you know? But, you know, I talk about this like this thing happened overnight, but it's taken years and it's taken lots of conversations and just always reminding them, you know, until they take that step, like, hey, bro, it's going to be all right, man. Someone's going to be by your side. You're not going to be alone. we're not going to let you fail. We're going to be there with you, you know, and support you. And, you know, when you talk to a guy 15 times in 6 months, at some point he's like, well, he must not be lying because he keeps telling me that.
It reminds me, yeah, sorry.
And then, you know, when we had our first group of 5 go through it, you know, the boys have started lining up. It became the thing, you know, because like, wow, it was real. Like, this wasn't all talk. They actually put the effort in and they done it. And that created its own internal thing where it's like, I want to do that now. If he can do it, I can do it, you know, and it's great, you know. That's even like, you know, as much as like getting a ticket, it's just like a driver's license, you know, getting guys out of school with no license, but next minute they all got class 2s or some of them are getting class 5 licenses. That's a huge milestone for a lot of people because their dad doesn't have a license, but he's driven around for 30 years. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it's right, you know.
And it reminds me a little bit about something that Rick said in a conversation where he said, this is not difficult work. It just takes commitment, persistence, and a firm hand. Just keep going. It's a slow burn. We need to just keep going. Cody, just a quick last question before I move on to Liz. When we look beyond Māori Pacifica Rangatau, what does diversity look like in your organization beyond that? And how do they respond to the approach that you take to diversity or to inclusion, which your story really is a story of inclusion? How do people who are not Māori and Pacifica respond to your approach?
Yeah, so like, you know, I base a lot of what we do around Māori Pacifica, but we do have Pākehā, we do have Asians working for our business as well, you know, and when we first started really doing a lot of tikanga Māori, you know, having karakias at our health and safety meetings and having kai when we're having meetings with each other because, you know, breaking bread is a big thing in Māori culture. The amount of engagement that they got from it, you know, like a lot of our foremen are Pākehā and Kiwi and that, you know, and it wasn't, they didn't take it as like anything wrong. They took it as like, oh, wow, like, this is how they care, you know, they do things differently. It's not just like a safety meeting or get in, get out, you know. We created an environment where we break bread and we're all about being there together. We have foremen's meetings every month and it's all about breaking bread with our leaders on the ground so we still hear what's happening on the coalface, you know, and it's not about work, it's all about how's our people, what are we up to? How's that guy going, you know, and things like that. And they do, they've taken it a lot, you know, because it comes with a certain level of care when we do it in that manner. And yeah, I don't know, we had pretty good engagement from everyone. And yeah, I think everyone enjoys himself. Doesn't matter what race and ethnicity we are or how old or how ugly we are. We still do the job and we have a laugh with each other and we go home, and that's the most important thing, going home every day.
That is great, and you are definitely doing something right because you've been doing it for over 32 years.
Yeah. So yeah, our business has been around for 32 years. I'm not even 32 yet, but
fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Cody. I've got a question in the chat, and I'm going to ask you that, even though this is a more gender-related question, but I think it's probably more appropriate that I ask you this. Nicole was saying, I find that I get drowned out at meetings. Do you have any tips for how to raise your own profile in a noisy male-dominated room? Now, it sounds to me like that is pretty much what's going to happen in your organization. What advice would you give Nicole?
Males are full of ego. They want to be the best. It's an alpha battle, you know. In meetings, that everyone wants to be the alpha. They want to be the main man. So the best way I always find for meetings is you've got to have a certain protocol with how it works, you know. Never be disrespectful, but always be honest with each other, you know. And if you are feeling drowned out, just be honest. But hey, you're not listening. I want to be completely honest with you. I'm not trying to hurt anyone's feeling, but I've got an opinion that I want to come across to you, you know. Because don't hide in the corner, and don't try and be this quiet mouse unless you're honest and tell exactly what everyone is wanting to hear. Then you're never going to have a voice. So the pure, like, to me, honesty is key, you know. Like, I always get pulled up from the women that work in our business, you know, and like, come on, Cody, you know, you got to listen. And because males, we don't like listening unless it's our own voice a lot of the time. So to be honest, it's just be honest and just say, hey, like, I don't appreciate you over talking me. I'm trying to get something across, and here you go.
Great advice. Thank you very much for that, Cody. So we are going to move on to Liz. So Liz also, I assume, has been introduced, but qualified roofer, a roof installer, operations manager at Stone Roofing. Hello, Liz. Lovely to speak to you again. So really interested to hear from your perspective some of the benefits that you've experienced as a result of actively recruiting for diversity. So I know that you are really actively looking at how can we get more women in the workforce. What benefits have you experienced?
Well, females, and just including just anyone in any type of diverse scenario. We actively employ anybody, so we don't specifically look for a type of gender or a type of race or anything like that. In saying that, we've got 80% of our staff are Māori, and we've had 3 other females beside myself on the tools, 2 of whom became pregnant and left due to that, and then another one who just couldn't hack it mentally. But in saying that, I always sit down and have one-on-one chats with them, and try to encourage them to beat their mental barriers. One of the females who actually went away pregnant, she came from a second round. Came, the first round she came, she just said, oh, look, after 2 months, look, I don't think I can do this. See you later. And then a couple of months down the track, she rang us back and said, actually, after I'd had a talk to her, I said, you know, probably a bit of time down the track, you'll start thinking about it and how you gave up, you know, because at the end of the day, I just don't want you to give up. Whatever goal you have or whatever it is you ever want to do, just don't give up. So anyway, a few months down the track, she rang us back and she came back. And then she fell pregnant a few months later. But and I'm actively still trying to get her to come back. Because when I had my daughter, she was in care since just after 11 months old. So she's 11 years old now. But yeah, so that's just that. I'm just trying to encourage that resilient mindset, that never give up mindset as well. Doesn't matter what industry you're in, whether it's the trades or whatever it is you're doing. Just don't let your surroundings defeat you. You know, I total core what everybody's been saying before me. You really have to encourage one another, and you have to lift the spirits of your employees, especially when there's diversity involved. we know that the trades are a male-dominated industry, and so what is my mindset. I've been around for the last 22 years, roughly. I left school when I was 15, and I'm 37 now. I've been in the roofing industry for the last maybe 11 years, a little bit longer if you add up all the time I did with my partner in the weekends. And then before that, I was in roading and infrastructure, traffic management, drain laying, road building, heaps of different things, heavy machinery. And I loved every single bit of it. And not one person was ever going to defeat me and my spirit. Yeah, the only thing was, I guess, trying to fight and battle for, I don't want to call it equal pay. Is, yeah, I don't want to call it equal pay, but I just believe that, you know, especially way back then, I don't know exactly what it's like right now for a female starting out in her wages and stuff, but it used to be a real battle to try and get as much money as a guy who had just started yesterday or today, when I had been working for the last 2 years or something, you know. So yeah, I probably went a bit off track there, but yeah.
No, and I think that you can you can absolutely say, I don't want to talk about equal pay, because we can talk about equal pay here, because you've got some absolutely fantastic customer stories here. And where there are such great examples of how you build a customer base through your diversity. Do you want to share that maybe with us?
Oh, well, yeah, I can touch on it. So, yeah, I guess just from working and obviously being up on the roof, you're visible. Anybody and everybody's going to see you. But I guess it's that constant, them seeing you constantly and seeing your work ethic constantly. Over time, now that we've established as a company, back in 2018, we've now had clients call us directly after doing a lot of subcontracting jobs through other main clients. So yeah, we've had them call us and say, oh, you know, I saw you on the roof, and now I finally found you. I don't, so-and-so gave me your number, and now we've had clients just, yeah, so it's been a win-win in some scenarios. But yeah, it's hard earned. Anything that people think is easy because you make it look easy, it's not. It's bloody well hard earned.
Yeah. And then there's a question that's in the chat here, or in the Q&A. From the experience, we are less likely to get improved gender in construction unless we change the demands of working hours. So what would you say is the working hours impact, and how could organizations who want to attract more gender diversity, and any diversity really, but specifically because you've been speaking about care responsibilities, how would working hours change, or could it change?
Well, before I had my daughter, I was starting at like 5:30 in the morning and finishing at like 8, 9 o'clock at night, voluntarily, because I liked working and I liked money. I would work Monday to Sunday if I could. And that was purely because I really, really enjoyed machinery and the infrastructure sector. Yeah. After we had our daughter, it was a completely different story. But in saying that, yeah, like, you know, morning care from 6:30 in the morning, as early as I could get it, you know, and then trying to liaise with my boss at the time, trying to finish at 5 o'clock every day because, you know, for traveling and all of those sort of things would impact the time that I would be picking her up, when obviously they have a closing time, which was 6 o'clock at night. And that wasn't really a good impact on not only myself stressing out, but starting off as a small business at that time as well. And then for our daughter, you know, she's 11 years old now and she refuses to go to after school care, and, you know, all of those sort of things. It just can get a bit tricky with the timing stuff. If you've got a good employer that can understand you know, there's just the basic realities of life, you know, and take you for who you are at that time, if you've got children, if you don't have children. But at the same time, it's up to you individually to that input that you are giving to your employer, things like that. Yeah.
Good. Thank you very much for that, Liz. And for all of those employers out there, listen to what Liz is saying about if you've got a good employer, then they will listen to what it is that your needs are. And then you get somebody like Liz who is so committed. So we are getting very close to 4 o'clock. So, and I would really like to just wrap up this conversation with a quick fire across all 4 of our panelists today. Just about what is your top tip for next steps for organizations who want to get started on this journey? What is the most important thing that people can do to get started? Can I start with you, Rick? Hello, we haven't been able to speak today. Rick, you are on mute.
Yeah, the important thing from my perspective is to get everybody in your organisation on board with this. A few individuals with the wrong attitudes can do a lot of damage if you're not careful. And so it's a matter of making sure that your team fully understand the rationale behind why you want diversity in your organisation. We've matured as an organisation over the last few years. And I remember when some of the earlier conferences, we were having conversations about ethnic diversity and gender diversity, and some of the bigotry and ignorance that came out of those discussions was quite disturbing. And we've had those arguments and put them behind us. And so it's so it's a matter of making sure everybody's on board and everyone's working towards the same end. Otherwise, you won't change positively the culture in your organisation.
Thank you, Rick. Stacey, what would be your top tip?
I think for employers, I'd say listen. You know, Cody gave us some really great examples, and Liz did, about what you can learn about your staff and how much value they get from you knowing a little bit more about them. And to the employees, I say this to a lot of people: be brave and be bold. You know, have the courage to share your opinions and your voice and say, look, I really need to go at 2:30 to do the school pickup, you know. And in some cases, part-time work is a hell of a lot more advantage to businesses than no person in that role. And that might be, you know, that might be the option. So listen and be bold, be brave.
Thank you. Great stuff. Thanks, Stacey. Cody, from your perspective, what is that great tip from your side?
Let's just take it as it comes, you know. There ain't no recipe. As anything progresses through life, it always changes, you know, and it's not about what happens right then and there. It matters about the end point of the journey, and that's all you got to focus on, you know. They may frustrate you, your team members, some days, but remember, there's an end goal for all of us, and don't follow no plan, just follow your gut, follow your heart, and usually it works out.
And stick with it.
Yeah.
Liz, last tip from your side. What's that top tip?
For employers, I'm gonna say just open your minds and just don't give up on your staff members. They're gonna throw a lot at you, and it's like you're parenting, but just don't give up on them. And for employees, don't give up on yourself, and like Stacey said, just be brave, and just keep going, and just don't give up. Set goals and just attack them and achieve them. And respect yourself and respect everybody around you, your employers, your other staff mates, everything, your clients, everyone around you, and you'll just have a better day. Yeah.
Good relationships make for good days on site. Thank you very much to the panel. It was a fantastic discussion today. And again, sorry, I am in my black box. But it was really, really fantastic and very inspirational to hear from all of you and everything, and how you approach this kaupapa from different perspectives, but also stick with it and make a difference and make a change in the sector. So we've got a couple of slides that Jen is going to put up for us, just around something that we can do. There are some tools that the Construction Accord has developed. So the first is the diversity tool. And there's a link there to something called www.simpleandengaging.com, which is the tool. It is a tool that was created to measure your current state of DI and actually a little bit of a roadmap for you and your own personal capacity when you want to do go on this journey. It's something that everybody in your organization can do, which gives just a little bit of recommendations. So it's deceptively simple. But that's the word, it's deceptively simple. It is really about becoming curious and how you can become increasingly curious, and through that curiosity start building your skill set around diversity, equity, inclusion, and start doing better in your organizations. So that's the links to the diversity tool. There's a link to us at Diversity Works for any more information, and then also to the diversity agenda. Now the diversity agenda is the industry coalition that works specifically in the construction sector with construction organizations to help bringing the momentum in the sector. So those links are all up there. And then some of the other great organizations that we can, if you can just swap to the next slide, please, Jean. I can't see that. I'll mention them, is Women in Infrastructure, is infrastructure.org.nz, and the other is also NAWIC, is the National Association for Women in Construction. So those are all various organizations who work in diversity and attention, in diversity and inclusion in the construction sector. Okay, so with that, I really want to thank you all for attending. Thank you so much to the speakers. It was fantastic to hear your perspectives today. I look forward to really seeing you and for you to be seeing me as well in some stage in the future. But for now, I really hope that you found inspiration and some good learnings and takeouts from today, and looking forward to seeing you again. Matewa.